Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the Universal Peace Federation's International Media Association for Peace monthly webinar on the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. My name is Ray Lapalkin, and I currently serve as a UPF rep and coordinator for IMAP in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, along with my colleagues Hans Moyer in Philadelphia and Pierre Beauregard in Montreal, Canada. The International Media Association for Peace recognizes the vital role that journalists play in guarding against totalitarianism and supporting the expansion of freedom. IMAP represents a worldwide professional network of journalists who support a socially responsible and moral media to convey accurate content, address the challenges of our time based on the highest principles of ethical journalism, while understanding that universal values are key elements of a world of peace. And if you haven't muted, if you could please do so now. Thank you. Our program today is titled IMAP in Korea, Communication Media in the Asia Pacific. And it'll be moderated today by Dr. Michael Jenkins, who's going to give us a firsthand report on the highlights of that conference. Dr. Michael Jenkins is president of the Washington Times Foundation, which sponsors the Washington Brief webcast. He's also chairman of the Washington Times Holding, the LLC that owns the Times News Organization. He's led a number of well-received fact-finding trips to Korea and Japan that have met with the legislative, executive, intelligence, and military leadership of those countries. As president of the nonprofit NGO, the Universal Peace Federation International, Dr. Jenkins has a decades-long involvement in starting and conducting peace initiatives all over the world, particularly in Northeast Asia and the Middle East. Welcome, Dr. Jenkins.
Ray, thank you so much. I'm just so happy to be here with you. We just returned from Korea from the World Summit 2022, 57 speakers who were heads of state, prime ministers, or presidents, recorded videos, as well as 27 were live. There were several thousand people there live at the bigger events, and about 1,000 through every session. And it was a tremendous, tremendous experience. We're going to play for you today the International Media Association for Peace program that featured Mr. Charlie Hurt of the Washington Times, nationally known in America commentator Trish Reagan, ABC's Kyra Phillips, and also Michael Breen, a very well-respected author on Korea. We're going to show those right now. I'd like to introduce our chairman of the Washington Times, who is also on video, but we thought we'd play this session for you this week because it's just so relevant, so up to date. And I'll talk a little more about the World Summit at the end with Mr. Larry Moffat, our executive director. So I'd like to ask EJ to go ahead and let's show first Mr. McDivitt's introduction, and then it will go right into Charlie Hurt from the Washington Times. Thank you, everybody. EJ, we need the sound.
You cannot hear the sound, sorry.
We have a tech problem for a moment here with the sound, but we'll get it.
Washington correspondent for the Charlotte Observer before coming to the Washington Times in 2003. If you ever are in the Washington area or in America, you'll see Charlie Hurt on Fox News and other stations, Fox Business, almost every day. He is such a warm-hearted, smart, likable guy, and people love him on television. But you'll see why when he comes to speak. He later served as the D.C. bureau chief and the White House correspondent for the New York Post and the editor of Drudge Report. And as chairman of the Times, I'm just so proud to have a man like Charlie Hurt as our opinion editor, because opinion and thought leadership is so vital in the media. Charlie, the floor is yours. Why don't you come up and share your thoughts? Let's welcome Charlie Hurt.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you all. I can't tell you what an honor and a pleasure and a privilege it is to be here. I'm particularly happy to be here in person, despite all of the obstacles of getting here, but it's worth being here with you. This is such an inspiring event. I guess I've been here for three or four of the past years. And I always learn something new, and I'm always humbled by the tremendous devotion that everyone in this room and everybody watching virtually, the commitment to peace on the peninsula. And every time I come, I go home with a renewed admiration for this tremendous effort. I thought I would just very quickly sort of run through a couple of things. Obviously, as an American, peace, as we heard from Vice President Pence earlier today, and Speaker Newt Gingrich, peace is, the world is a much better place when America is strong. And peace has a much better opportunity to thrive when America is strong. And so I can understand why some people would be sort of troubled by everything that's going on in Washington these days. There's a lot of upheaval in Washington. I would say there's a tremendous political realignment going on in Washington right now. And quite frankly, a lot of people in Washington are the most upset about it because they thought things were just fine the way they were going. It turns out that the American people felt differently. And so along comes a guy like Donald Trump who sought to overturn the status quo in Washington. Obviously, we had some great statesmen, and I would say that Vice President Mike Pence is one of them, who realized the potential in President Trump for that American strength. One of the most disturbing things about this political realignment that we're watching right now is the role of the American media, which has been quite embarrassing. I say that as somebody who has been worked at newspapers all over the country. My entire professional career has been working for newspapers, and I am ashamed to have seen what my colleagues in our print, television, across the spectrum, they decided that they didn't like Donald Trump and they would do anything to get rid of him. And it's been a very sad couple of years watching that. A wonderful exception to this has been the Washington Times. We have been around for 40 years. Tom and I were just talking about this, and I guess I hadn't realized how old I'd gotten, but I personally had been part of the Washington Times for about half of that time. I've been hired 3 different times at the Washington Times. My first time was about 20 years ago. And as Tom said, I'm now the opinion editor. The importance of a newspaper like the Washington Times in our nation's capital that is obviously fact-based, it seeks the truth, it does not believe in censoring opinions that we disagree with. That is vital to a free republic. It's why when our founders drafted the Constitution for the United States of America, you had the 3 branches of government, and then you had the 4th estate, because they believed that a free, vibrant, open exchange of ideas, a free, open debate was that vital to a republic. You cannot have a free democratic republic without a vibrant press that is unbowed and unwilling to censor people that they disagree with. And so I would like to say to Dr. Moon how incredibly grateful I am, not just as a journalist, a reporter, and now an opinion editor for the Washington Times, but as an American, that we have that vitally important voice, and we have had it for 40 years. And even today, as the media, so much of the media has become splintered because of the internet, and there's a lot of wonderful things about the internet, and a lot of wonderful things about more people getting a voice to report the news. But you still have to have newspapers with editors and reporters who know how to expose wrongdoing and tell the truth. And if you don't have that, your freedom will fade away. So I'm also thankful to our president of our paper, Chris Dolan, Dr. Jenkins, who I think is here somewhere, as well as Tom. It is, and one of the things that I've really enjoyed in recent years about these trips is you know, we'll come over here and we'll do these fact-finding trips where we go and we talk to people and we hear and we learn about this issue of the peace on the state of peace on the peninsula. And it is that, it's hard to say what the exact answer to this problem is. I certainly don't propose to know the exact answer, but I know the way there, and the way there is through free, open exchange of ideas, which you can't have without a free and vibrant press. And so I am profoundly grateful for that, and I am so pleased to be here today and part of this, and I look forward to coming back again in the very near future. Hopefully it will be easier to travel for all of us to get here, but the fact that you all came here despite those obstacles, I think reveals how important this mission is, and more importantly reveals how devoted each of you is to the cause of peace. And for that I'm very grateful. Thank you very much.
Charlie? We have a little time, and I want to kind of break the mold here a little bit. I see you on Fox News at least 2, 3, 4 times a week. Saw you on Gutfeld a couple weeks ago. That was great. And I always wanted to ask Charlie, what's it like to go on television on Fox News? You're talking to 20 million people, and how do you prepare for that as a journalist?
Well, it's interesting because actually writing for a daily newspaper where you have to churn out the news every single day does so much more to prepare you for doing television segments, for example, than anything else you could. You can't really study for these things. Either you are paying attention, and quite frankly, and I think that this is an important reason why, as surprised as so many people were in Washington by the rise of Donald Trump and what occurred over the past 4 or 5 years with the rise of Trump and this profound political realignment that is going on, and we see it across the spectrum from economics to issues of military engagements overseas, such as Ukraine, that realignment. I don't think that realignment was a particular surprise to the Washington Times, and the reason is because we feed the fire of the news every single day, and more importantly than anything, I think, is that because we are based in Washington, and we have most of our reporters are there, but we don't consider ourselves as a newspaper just for Washington. We consider ourselves a newspaper for America and for regular voters, and Therefore, we put a lot of effort into making sure we cover the stories that Americans, normal, regular Americans care about, not just the gossip and palace intrigue that goes on in Washington. That's really quite irrelevant to us. It's far more important to us to inform and educate and demand answers from leaders for those people out in the country. And I think that's a big reason why we have weathered the last few years as well as we have. That and the fact that unlike, and I feel like I'm being kind of harsh to my colleagues in the media, but honestly, I would be harsher if I could be. Our devotion to telling the truth no matter what has served us well. A lot of my colleagues in the press, at other newspapers, better known newspapers, gave all that up in their pursuit to hurt Donald Trump and to get him out of office. And I think that they did grievous harm to themselves, but also a great deal of harm to us as a country.
Let's thank Charlie Hurt for a great presentation.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Charlie. Our next presentation is going to come to us by video. This is a well-known journalist in America, formerly with Fox Business. Her name is Trish Regan. She's the host of The Trish Regan Show. She's an award-winning financial journalist, an American television talk show host and author who interprets political events through an economic lens. She has a degree from Columbia University. She couldn't be here with us today, but is a colleague and friend and greatly supportive of the whole IMAP program. Let's watch Trish Regan. Thank you.
Peace on the Korean Peninsula is possible. Hello, everyone. I am Trish Regan. I want to thank the Universal Peace Federation and the organization's founder, Dr. Hak Ja-han Moon, for all that she and the Federation have done to promote a peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula, including bringing all of us here together, heads of state, members of the media, members of the business community, and members of so many different faith groups for this critical World Summit 2022. This is what it takes, coming together. I'm a longtime American journalist who has spent my career as a television news anchor covering finance, politics, and international relations. I'm a big believer in everyone in this world getting the opportunity and, importantly, the freedom to prosper economically. And for every human being to be able to go to bed at night not worried about whether there's a risk for war, a risk of starvation, a risk of losing one's ability to think and speak freely. And it's why I'm so honored to be part of this prestigious event here today. Again, my thanks to the Moon family for all they are doing to promote peace, as well as the co-chairs of this event, His Excellency Prime Minister Samdech Hun Sen of the Kingdom of Cambodia, and His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, former Secretary General of the United Nations. We're living through a difficult period. As a result of the pandemic, we've learned how vulnerable we all really are. And as nations across the globe confront not just the pandemic, but increasingly the economic challenges that have come along with the pandemic, including a supply chain crisis, an escalating global poverty rate, inflation that won't quit, increasing conflicts now between nations, and sadly, a persistent breakdown in the family unit, which in my view, as the mother of 3 young children myself, leads to so many other social and economic problems. I'll have more on the family in just a moment. But I just want to say, despite all this, right, despite all the challenges out there growing, there's hope. There's hope for peace. A unified Korea would show the world that anything is possible. You know, the support comes from the family unit. That's what helps a country to achieve prosperity. That's what helps achieve success and, importantly, peace. These are values I know Dr. Moon is passionate about as well. And these are values that have served South Korea so well. Consider the extraordinary transformation of the Korean economy. It really is the ultimate economic success story. And much of that success, I believe, comes from the family, including the mothers, who are there nurturing their children and helping them to find their own paths in the world. So just think about what it would mean if families could be reunited, if children could grow up with the security of knowing their whole family, their mothers, their fathers, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, their entire extended family. Consider the economic powerhouse that the Korean Peninsula would really become. The South has already proven it, thanks to strong family values, along with smart and early investment in the manufacturing sector, which has been diversified into numerous other areas, including technology. I mean, you think about South Korea today, it has become a world leader in innovation, a place where investors from all over the globe want to put their money because they know it will grow. South Korea has grown into the 10th largest economy in the world, with nearly $2 trillion a year in economic output. So just imagine what it will become when it's reunited with the North. To put these accomplishments in a little bit of perspective, I think it's interesting to look at per capita, per person, economic output in South Korea. You know, back in 1960, it was $79 per capita. Amazing. Today, according to the World Bank, it's actually around $32,000. So South Korea is clearly doing something right. It has created an economic model that we can all look to with such admiration. And like I said, it's just the beginning, because a united peninsula could grow the economy so much more, enabling a united Korea to double or even triple its GDP in a very short period of time. I like to look at the contrast between the North and the South as just an incredible case study in how free market capitalism really does have the power to lift so many people out of poverty and inspire innovation, whereas communism robs people of their dignity and leaves them, as we see so many in North Korea today, in an actual state of starvation. You know, in South Korea, there's this tremendous advancement in innovation in medical care, and yet the most basic needs of the people in the North cannot be met, and it's not right. It's not right because the people deserve so much more. They really do, but you know what? The North and the South, they can be reunited. We can fix this together. It can be done in a peaceful way through nuclear disarmament. But to do that, we need everyone. We need the whole world on board. I know many Americans are committed to this. Many of them are actually speaking at this event. Leaders that I've interviewed over the years, including former Vice President Mike Pence and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, and former President Donald Trump. But you know what? This can't be just a U.S. effort. This quest for peace needs to be a global one, which is why I'm so heartened to see 157 countries represented here. That's amazing. We need collectively, all of us, to come together, one world, together to look out for and to champion the human rights of the people in North Korea. And you know what? We can do that peacefully using every diplomatic channel available. And if we do that, if we have buy-in and commitment from the entire world community, the Korean Peninsula can be reunited. Families will get to see their long-lost loved ones, and everyone in Korea will have the chance to prosper. Everyone will have the chance to prosper economically. You know what? That is good news for the Asian economy as a whole. It's good news for global investors. It's good news for the world, and it's also just the right thing to do. So thank you for everyone for being here, for your personal commitment to seeing peace in the world today. We've got a chance to do this. Your commitment matters.
Thank you. Michael, is that you?
Man is an imposter, I tell you. Thanks, Tom. It's a great honor to be here. I was actually going to make a joke about the photograph that I sent for you to put up, which was 10 years old, but I can't make it anymore. So, I think I don't need to, I was going to start by making an argument for why peace and reunification are necessary, but I think with this audience I don't need to do that. Peace, reconciliation, and the eventual reunification of the rival Koreas is clearly desirable. If you've seen that photograph, the satellite photo of the Korean Peninsula where all these lights are blazing in South Korea and blazing in China, and then there's pitch black in between, with a few spots of light, like Pyongyang and one or two other places that look like lights on the rocks in a lighthouse in the sea. Well, I think peace, reunification will turn those lights on. It would also end the terrible suffering of the North Koreans, as we know, and would heal the broken identity of all Koreans. So if anyone tells you it's not a good idea, then there are a few thoughts for you to throw back at them. And as Chairman Timosina said from Kathmandu, it would be good for regional peace and prosperity. Indeed, and I think one or two speakers have said this, that peace and reunification on the Korean Peninsula will have a global impact. We expect reunified Korea in some way to make the world a better place. So, what is to be done? Charlie Hurt said when he was talking, very humbly said, he's not sure. Kyra Phillips made one or two points, and I think I sort of fall in the same camp of here's one or 2 points, but also I'm not sure. But I'd like to give you some thoughts. Reunification, first of all, reunification, I would suggest to you, should not be our vision. I think it should be our strategy, or one of the strategies to achieve the vision. And rolling up the barbed wire along the DMZ may happen rapidly, like the fall of the Berlin Wall, or it may be in slow motion, like the EU came together slowly. But reunification itself will be a process leading to an end. And so what is that end? To figure that out, we need to ask, what type of state do reunified Koreans, the Korean people, what kind of state do they want to live in? What are its most important non-negotiable characteristics? In my opinion, aside from the political explanations, peaceful, cooperative reunification has not happened here for 70 years for one simple reason: the absence of shared values. The values, the things that are most important in North Korea, which underlie the functioning of their political, economic, and social institutions, are the values of race-based nationalism and devotion to a strong leader. South Korea, on the other hand, as you know well, is a modern democracy. Its people value freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom of assembly. They value free and fair elections, equality, fairness, justice, and all those things we associate with democracy. So our vision for a reunified Korea, I would say, must be developed with these democratic values in mind. What we want is a democratic, free market, reunified Korea set in the context of a democratic, free market Northeast Asia. So I'm not going to go off on this tangent, but what I'm saying is we want China to become a democracy as well. Nothing less, frankly, is acceptable. So what is the strategy, what are the strategies to get us there? The North Korean leadership fears absorption by the South, or perhaps it's motivated by a desire or a delusion that it can still take over the South. It may have both of these thoughts in its mind at the same time. But I assure you, it has no interest in reconciliation. Kyra Phillips talked about this earlier. Its strategy, for as long as it is weaker than South Korea, which it is to blow hot and cold, to take one step forward and one step back, all the time building its weaponry. It doesn't matter. I don't think it makes any difference who the president is in the United States or who the president is in South Korea. That is the situation we're dealing with in North Korea. Given this impasse and mindful of our vision, I say that our side must use every opportunity to nudge North Korea and China as well in that direction of democracy. Second point, I believe that we are over-obsessed with the North Korean leader. Let's face it, he's not going to have an accident and fall off his horse, have a near-death experience with his grandfather, and then wake up in the hospital as a liberal Democrat or conservative Republican, whichever you prefer. He might, but I don't think we should count on that. So beyond the diplomatic, I'm not saying be unpleasant to North Korea or rude, beyond the diplomatic courtesies, however, the approach to unification, I think, right now, should not be to curry favor with him or try to manipulate him. I think we should be thinking, how can we bypass him? So as the politics is stuck, I recommend that we focus on the emotional underpinning and build trust. Look for ways to build trust. And that means addressing two things, I think. One, addressing North Korean fears and building bonds. So what are these fears that must be addressed? Consider this. Many of you here are Koreans. I think a lot of you overseas folk are familiar with Korea, but I don't know if you know this. We've had democracy here since 1987. Of the first 5 democratically elected presidents in South Korea, 2 were jailed after their terms. Each term, by the way, a single term, 5 years. 2 were jailed, 2 avoided prosecution, but their children were jailed. 1 committed suicide to forestall a corruption investigation. The 6th president was impeached and given a 30-year jail sentence and was pardoned a few weeks ago after 5 years. We have a vicious political culture here, and we have a floppy system of justice that bends under pressure. I'm serious. Let's wait and see what happens to President Moon. I'm not predicting anything, but wait and see what happens to President Moon. But my point is, if you're observing all of this from north of the border, Kim Jong-un and the North Korean elite is looking at this, and then here we come, UPF, and say, oh, we want to talk about reunification. He's going to say, you're kidding me, right? You think I am going to unify with these people? No. So I recommend, in addressing this, that UPF, here's a thought for you, Tom, I recommend that UPF propose that South Korea pass a law committing future governments to no retribution. And I think we should champion a post-reunification truth and reconciliation process for justice and for healing, and to ensure that, and also we should try and ensure somehow that a future reunified Korean government doesn't backslide on such a commitment. Now, I have to be honest, I think the Koreans here will agree with me, Koreans are not very good at doing this. They tried a few years ago, to deal with alleged collaboration with Japanese imperialism and atrocities committed under dictatorships, and they failed. So they'll need help. So I think there's a role here for our friends in Cambodia and in South Africa and other countries that have an experience of how to do this. Another point, I think, regarding the focus on the emotion that I mentioned, is building ties. Right now, North and South Korea are not families. They're not brothers and sisters. They're enemies. If North Korea takes over tomorrow, I bet you, certainly me, my friend Jacko over here, who's lived in Korea for a long time, and all the Koreans here with our families will be on the ferry to Japan immediately. They're not going to be very nice to us. So the first step is to move from being enemies to becoming neighbors. This emotional process can be approached, and has been approached. I'm sort of overstating this just to make this point. It has been approached through culture and sports and other forms of engagement. I think the South Korean government, which controls things very much, needs to lighten up and let activists and artists be more free in their dealings with the North, and indeed in their expression. Right now, there was a law passed recently that it hasn't been tested yet, but it kind of makes it a crime to criticize North Korea, which is an odd thing in South Korea. But you need to have some measure of freedom here. I think we need to let modern culture, not just K-pop and Korean movies, but also international culture, influence the people of North Korea, just as the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and everybody influenced the Soviet communists a generation ago. And I think there's a role here for international society. Final point, I think we need to be bold. Last week, in preparation for this meeting, I read the autobiography of Reverend Moon, the founder of UPF. It's been sitting on my shelf for about 10 years and I hadn't read it, and so I thought, oh, I'm going to read this. And I recommend it. It's a very, very good, very moving read. But in it, he describes how he asked the political scientist Morton Kaplan in, I think it was 1984 or 85, to put together a conference that would declare the end of Soviet communism. Now, Professor Kaplan wanted to sort of kind of moderate this a little bit to make it softer, but Reverend Moon was insistent on this. And I guess as the conference was his idea and he was paying for it, he got his way. And so Professor Kaplan went out and declared the end of communism. A bit early. I think everybody looked and thought, that's a bit odd. I think Reverend Moon, well, he says in his autobiography, he had a kind of an instinct that it was coming to an end. 70 years was enough. Enough time for communism to be undone and worn out from within by its untruths and by its failings. But he could have been wrong on that. But his argument was very interesting, and it was this. It was that a declaration itself has its own energy to bring forth its message. For example, you probably had this experience. If you're down and depressed and things aren't working for you, and you're making one mistake after another, the solution is not to say, I'm a hopeless loser. Even though you are, the solution is not to say I'm a loser. It's much better to declare, I'm better than this, and I will be great. And then the change begins there and then. So it's in that sense that declarations function. They're not really objective truths. They're more ways to redirect energy, if you like. Well, it's been over 70 years that the two Koreas have been divided. Their sister, and I'm talking to you as somebody who in 1990 predicted reunification in 1992. So I'm a very, very bad prophet. And their system may not have run out of steam yet, because I don't think the North Koreans are really communists. They're not intellectual Marxist-Leninists. And they're very, very stubborn people. But I think its system will run out of steam in time. And I recommend, a further recommendation for UPF is to consider making a bold declaration to move things along in this way. And to leave you with one final thought, and I'm aware I'm taking too much time, I'm sorry. To leave you with one final thought, I recommend that you hold your next World Summit in Pyongyang and make the declaration there. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Ms. Kyra Phillips. Kyra joined CNN in 1999, and she was an embedded reporter during the war in Afghanistan. She also was granted access to the U.S. Navy Air Wing, and from there actually flew on combat missions with pilots to get the firsthand experience. Kyra later joined ABC News as a correspondent and remains there today. So let's hear from Kyra.
Thank you so much for having me here today. You know, when I was asked to address this conference and asked to share professional reflections, I actually went back to the year 2000, 22 years ago almost. It's when I reported on South Korea scaling down its commemoration of the Korean War in light of renewed hopes of peace between the two Koreas. And from the CNN desk, I was telling the world about the recent summit between the presidents of North and South Korea and how it had quite an impact on the way the Korean War was being remembered, and that the war's commemoration in Seoul went off that year with much less fanfare than originally planned. I remember the images of cannons firing round after round as thousands of veterans gathered at Seoul's war memorials, bowing their heads in tribute for the millions of people who lost their lives during the Korean War. And this ceremony was marking the 50th anniversary of the start of the Korean conflict. It was low-key and it was very solemn. The emphasis was on honoring the veterans, South Korean, as well as representatives from 21 nations who fought under the United Nations command. And I remember our correspondent on the ground interviewing a Korean War veteran, a U.S. soldier who had fought as an infantryman during the conflict. He described the last time he saw Seoul. He said it was destroyed. People were hungry. There was no electricity, no lights. And then he described the Seoul that he was looking at decades later, how it had rebounded, come alive. And when he saw the capital so many years later, it was such a different experience, a wonderful experience, he said. You know, Korea is best known for two things: its long-standing friendship with the United States and for the so-called Miracle on the Han River, the stunning economic turnaround that has occurred, transforming Korea from a struggling nation into an economic and technological powerhouse. From the moment that you touch down at Incheon Airport, you get the sense that you're in a vibrant, prosperous nation with a tremendous amount of momentum for the future. Korea truly is a jewel of East Asia, a nation with a remarkable history of emerging from the crushing devastation of war to become a shining light of what is possible when policies are directed toward economic development, a robust democracy, and genuine concern for its people. Well, it has long been thought that the Korean Peninsula could be the flashpoint for the next major conflict. That sense has been tempered somewhat by recent developments around Ukraine and Russia and China's increasing aggressive moves in the South China Sea, and speculation about the possible forced reunification with Taiwan. Still, the Korean Peninsula is considered one of the most dangerous places in the world, and unless there is more progress toward ending the decades-long tensions between the North and South, it will remain so. So, as we witnessed during the Trump administration, a diplomatic solution to the stalemate can be both promising and elusive. The first summit with Kim Jong-un in June 2018 appeared to build on the sense of goodwill that negotiations between the South and North had achieved. But words are one thing, real progress is quite another. The subsequent Hanoi summit in February of 2019 once again proved the frustration of dealing with Kim. And while President Trump's meeting with Kim at the DMZ in June of that year provided some pretty historic images, progress and peace continue to remain elusive. So, how to break the impasse and move toward an ultimate solution to the fragile détente between the North and South? Well, that, of course, is the million-dollar question. The regime in the North appears genuinely serious about the issue of reconciliation, but the formula for how to achieve it is a true Gordian knot. Speaking to former administration officials in the U.S., the most thorny issue to resolve is what political system the peninsula would reunite under. Would it be the representative democracy of the South or the dynastic totalitarian model of the North? So the United States is in a unique position to push the process forward. In the first summit, former President Trump presented a now famous video, as you know, to Kim about the possibilities of economic prosperity that reunification could bring. Former Trump administration national security officials still believe that economic development for the North is the key. The presentation was tantalizing, for sure. Could North Korea experience the same economic miracle the South was enjoying? There's no reason to think it couldn't. But Kim is worried first and foremost about his survival, and he believes his expanding nuclear arsenal is the best way to ensure it. That is why his pledge of 2017 to denuclearize has gone literally nowhere. Talks to bring about a resolution have historically involved representatives from the South and North, the United States, and China. China, of course, has grave concerns about a reunified Korea that has strong ties to the United States right on its doorstep. The presence of nearly 30,000 U.S. troops in the South certainly does nothing to allay China's concerns. The heady possibilities associated with reunification have been presented. But how to bridge the gap between how the two nations function, well, the two forms of government are utterly at odds with each other. Perhaps in the initial stages of reunification, a form of hybrid existence might be possible. The two entities would not be immediately reunited, as in the case of West and East Germany, but would adopt the model of one nation with two states or provinces that have different systems of governance. So in closing, while current global events have appeared to have put the urgent drive toward reunification on the back burner, it ultimately remains one of the most important foreign policy issues. Kim Jong-un continues to flex his muscles, firing off a number of missiles this year already. And the South continues living under the constant threat that the fragile détente could quickly come unraveled with horrific consequences. Reunification could be an extraordinary accomplishment. It's finding the path to success that remains the challenge of our time. And speaking of time, thank you for allowing me to spend time with you today.
Well, we thank Ms. Kyra Phillips for this excellent presentation. And I'm very, very happy to be with you here. And we're concluding this program. Next week, we're going to have a very special Washington brief. Every first Tuesday of the month, we have a Washington brief chaired by Ambassador Christopher Hill and commentary by Ambassador Joseph Dutrani, who was the U.S. negotiator for the six-party talks, as well as Dr. Alexander Manzrow from Georgetown University. That'll be next Tuesday. The following Tuesday, we'll show another one of the World Summit presentations on the session with Vice President Pence, Secretary Pompeo, Secretary Esper, and Congressman Dan Burton. Another excellent session that was dealing with heads of state and parliamentarians. So Larry, tell us about our, well, I first want to thank Ray Lepaukin and also Hans Moyer for their leadership of the International Media Association for Peace. It's one of the associations that we have formed from the Universal Peace Federation, of which I'm also president. With Dr. Walsh is our chairman. IMAP is focused on media thought and views on how to bring peace. Media is critical for peace. We also have the International Summit Council for Peace, which is heads of state. The parliamentarians is IAPP, religious leaders, International Association for Peace and Development. We have business and also academia, as well as culture and arts. It's really a very exciting look at North and South Korea and other conflict points in the world, not only from the point of view of politics, diplomacy, military, and so forth, but how about arts and culture? The arts and culture exchange between North and South Korea is one of the most viable ways to get people communicating. And we had a tremendous program last week on our Think Tank 2022 with Joseph Terwilliger from Columbia University, who also has been to North Korea and has also had performances here from the North Korean orchestra, combined with his brass ensemble and US orchestra. It's amazing. They could get together for culture and arts, and we're working on getting them together on everything else. Larry, tell us about next week's Washington Brief. The Washington Brief is only on the first Tuesday. It's a very special production and program. Go ahead, Larry. Who's our guest?
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. Thank you very much. Next week is going to be very interesting. We have a former 4-star general, Walter Sharp. General Sharp was a commander of the, at the DMZ, between North and South Korea, you have 3 kind of main elements. You have the UN Command, you have the USROK Combined Forces Command, and you have US Forces Korea. These things overlap in jurisdiction, which is why they generally come under the purview of one person. But they are 3 distinct things, and to be the commander of all 3 of those means you are in charge of everything that's going on militarily between North and South Korea, and you work with your Korean counterparts. We have, and General Sharp was commander of the DMZ and the US 8th Army from 2008 to 2011. Now, under Kim Jong-il, there's the grandfather, Kim Jong-un, the grandfather, Kim Il-sung, who I had the opportunity to meet in North Korea. And then there's Kim Jong-il, his son. And under him, nuclear testing started in about 2006. So this was kind of in the early years of the nuclear testing. So he was there when this kind of got going. This became the identity of North Korea, and Kim Jong-un has embraced it solidly and has put all his eggs in the basket of I'm keeping my nukes, despite occasional random talks about denuclearization. Most analysts figure that's really not going anywhere. So anyway, he's a very prolific voice. Plus, he has served throughout Asia for many years. He's highly decorated, so he has a chance to talk about Asia, about the U.S. involvement in Asia. He's probably got a huge historical institutional memory. He's an interesting gentleman. I've enjoyed communicating with him and helping to set up next week. So that's going to be a very interesting session. The Washington Brief, as all of those are, so you should be there Tuesday, March 1st at 2 p.m.
Thank you, Larry. Finally, I'd like to thank the chairman of the Washington Times, Mr. Tom McDivitt, for moderating this program, putting it together. He's still in Korea at this time. I just returned. And special thanks to Charlie Hurt, the opinion editor of the Times. So we're very grateful for our audience here. Please share these videos. You can find them on our Facebook, Universal Peace Federation, and also USA. And also the Washington Brief you can find on washingtonbrief.org. And all the program that we did in Korea is also at worldsummit.us, worldsummit.us. You can see all the different sessions and the videos, and they're readily available to you. So I want to thank you to everybody. Great to have a good session here. Thanks to Hans and and Ray again, and we'll see you next week on the Washington Brief. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.